So previously we've talked about flicks and trills, and for the most part these have been pretty straightforward patterns. Today I want to give you guys an introduction into tech. Now I've mentioned tech multiple times in my videos, but I never really defined or explained what it really means. And that's kind of what I'm struggling to do, because the definition of tech is actually pretty vague and it differs between games. But I'm going to try to give you a broad understanding that should hopefully get your foot in the door. So beginning your rhythm game journey, you'll start to recognize certain patterns as you climb up in difficulty. And at some point, the further you go up, it starts to split into different directions. Let's call these speed and tech. On the speed route, the charts are the same patterns you've already learned and experienced. They're pretty consistent and easy to read, and easy to understand what is going on. What gives it its difficulty is that it's just a lot faster. On the other hand, the tech route, the songs might not be as fast, but there will be some wacky patterns or odd rhythms thrown in. Things that you might not fully understand first time viewing. You'll have to spend a bit of time practicing, studying, and maybe even developing a technique. That being said, aside from a few exceptions, most charts aren't as black and white as I described. Songs will be like 80% straightforward and 20% tech, or vice versa. It all really depends on the song and the person charting, but you get the idea. What's true for most rhythm games is that once you get to a certain point in difficulty, the two paths start to become one again. And it's both really fast and really technical. A great example that I can think of are the 31s in PJSK, specifically the experts versus the masters. Jinsei expert, for example, leans more towards the fast and mostly straightforward route, and fixer master is more technical. Hopefully this gives you a rough idea of what tech is and how it's different from straightforward patterns. Anyways, moving on, today I want to talk about switches. For lack of a better name, I haven't really found an accepted term for these patterns, aside from foot switches found in dance games such as ITG, Pump It Up, and DDR, and that's kind of where I took the name from. But before I continue with that, I want to address a mistake in one of my past videos. Well, it's not really a mistake, but I just want to add some more clarity to something I said in my trill video. So a bunch of Osumania players have flooded the comments to inform me that this pattern here already has a name, which are jacks or jackhammers, and I would say they're half correct. Yes, you can interpret and execute them as jacks, which is just using one finger to hit all the notes. Or you can treat them as switches and alternate your hands. This was a bad example to use on my part, because it's ambiguous and you can use either technique to hit this pattern. PJSK has both intended jacks and intended switches. But for games like Osumania and 2DX, they only have jacks. And that's because games like these have a dedicated finger for each button. There isn't much reason to really deviate from your main position. So notes that come down on the same lane, you're forced to hit them all with the same finger. PJSK, on the other hand, has a ton more options for finger placements and note assignment. What I mean by that is your fingers aren't forced to only one particular section of the tap area. Your right hand will sometimes need to tap notes on the left side and vice versa. And the center can have notes intended for the left and right hand throughout the song. It's really all up to the person charting. So now with that being said, I want to move on to the main topic of this video. Breaking away from lower end charts, the more you go up in difficulty, the more often you'll see these patterns. And I think learning how to execute them and being able to recognize them will help you so much in the long run of playing PJSK as well as other games. So 90% of the time, whenever I see two notes directly on top of each other, it's a clear sign that it's a switch. And most commonly, it's usually this pattern here. To really understand what's going on here, you have to break it down into two sections. Let's have blue represent your left hand and red represent your right hand. Seeing these two notes, you instinctively hit them with your left finger first and then right. And then looking at the second half of this pattern, This note is left and this note is right. Putting them together, the intended way to execute it is left, right, left, right. Some people will read this as left, right, 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 which in my opinion is a bit awkward. It really opens you up to potentially more mistaps, and you can really mess up the rest of the pattern if the switch chains into more tech. Another common pattern you might see are switches that have different lengths, usually a short note followed by a long note or vice versa. Breaking this down, you have to imagine the long note as half of what it is. So this pattern wants you to hit the first note with your right hand, then the second note with your left hand. Adding the rest of the notes back in, you can start to figure out the pattern and realize which finger needs to hit which note. Alternatively, you can also imagine it the opposite and just treat them all as jacks. In the end, it's all about your personal preference and how you want to play. But if you're struggling and certain techniques aren't working for you, try something else. Play and test and see what works best for you. So, how do you differentiate between jacks and switches? This is going to sound like a cheap answer, but it really just comes down to practicing and playing the game. Start by looking out for the two patterns I talked about earlier and practice being able to instinctively execute it to the point where switching your fingers becomes natural. Over time, you'll be able to recognize them instantly. Ultimately, playing rhythm games at a high level means half the time breaking down, studying, and practicing charts. It's alright if you can't hit a switch the first time you see it. What's important is remembering, oh, there's some tech in this chart. I gotta be ready for it next time I play. Anyways, here are some recommendations I have for practicing your switches. Note that these don't really start showing up in charts until the high end of experts and majority of master charts. Into the Night Master, 6 Trillion Years Expert, Don't Fight the Music Expert, Unsung Melodies Master, DSCF Master, Daybreak Frontline Master, and Last Score Master. These are just a few charts, but please feel free to leave a comment with other songs you think that would be great practice as well. That's all I have to say for today. Hopefully you guys learned something and continue to work on improving your skill set. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I've spent a lot of time working on this video, so if you can leave a like, that would help me out so much. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.